let me introduce myself. My name is Ben Brown, and I am not the state senator for this area, okay? No relation to the gentleman. I am from Sullivan. I am the historian for the Harney Mansion at Sullivan, Missouri. The Harney Mansion is a building that has a pre-Civil War component to it, and then it was built in 1872. It was its completion date. It was the summer home for Major General William Selby Harney. I don't have time to go into the whole thing on General Harney. He's a fascinating character. Would I like to serve under him? No way, thank you very much. Because when he gave an order, he really meant it yesterday. But I am able to walk the pages of American history through his life. By the way, he knew 8 presidents of the United States personally, and often invited to the White House before some of the senior generals in the Army. So he's a rather fascinating character. Would you like him? Yes, question?
Where is the house in Sullivan?
House in Sullivan, if you go down the interstate to the second exit, and come up the ramp, you'll see the Cracker Barrel off to your left.
Yeah.
Make a left-hand turn, go to the stoplight, make a right-hand turn behind Cracker Barrel and down to the next stoplight. You're going to make a left-hand turn and put you on Elmont Road, follow it up to the railroad. It'll come up like this and all of a sudden turn a little bit. You can only go left or right. Go right, 1 block, turn left, and 3.5 blocks down the road, you'll find the mansion.
And what's the street that it's on?
It's on Mansion Street.
Mansion Street.
Now, it is the only building in town that is pre-Civil War, has a Civil War component. Almost all your towns here do not have buildings from the Civil War era. Very few. And many of the churches that you see were not Civil War era churches. Most of the people met in their homes, unless you were a Catholic, because they didn't have the money to build a church. And by the time the 1880s rolled around, we begin to get churches. So welcome to the Civil War Hour. This is called the Depots of Burning. You'll begin to understand why as we go along with this report. Every presentation has a starting point. My starting point was in the year 2014, when Harney Mansion received the official Civil War history display from the state of Missouri. We were to have it for 8 weeks. Well, it came with a caveat, a simple request. Please include local history with this presentation. What history? So we looked at each other and said, what are we going to do? Well, we found a solution. Because the mansion has property in both Franklin and Crawford counties, what event covered the 2 counties, which we are going to do tonight? And it is Price's 1864 Missouri campaign. Now, some people call it a raid. Depends on who's writing it. You know, it's kind of like, is it a tomato or a tomato? Depending on who is doing the writing. There are thousands of books written on the Civil War, but very few books are written on the Civil War in Missouri. You will be hard-pressed to find a good book on the Civil War in Missouri. As I said, we settled on Price's 1864 campaign. The 1864 events, the 2 days in Crawford County, the 3 days in Franklin County, would barely make a paragraph in a history book. We don't exist. Now, we also asked ourselves a question. When the rebel army departed southern Arkansas in the summer of 1864, were any of the horse soldiers, that's what I call them, not cavalrymen, horse soldiers, because they weren't professionally trained, from the 2 counties? Well, to date, we have found 43. 34 men from Franklin County and 9 men from Crawford County who rode out of Arkansas with General Price and did all the action in the 2 counties that we're going to talk about. Their military, by the way, these men are found in 5 different regiments in 1 battalion in Marmaduke's brigade. That narrows it down for you. The military records of the 43 men reveal a pattern of events as they entered our 2 counties. We are going to have a battle. We're going to have a demonstration. We're going to have a skirmish. And we're going to have an encounter. Well, battle explains itself. You are actually going to be in combat. What's a demonstration? I'm going to hold you in place by faking an attack on you while the rest of us leave. And then you'll slowly pull out as well and vanish, leaving the enemy just sitting there wondering what's next. A skirmish is just a word for a small, minute battle. It's not going to be all day long. It may just be 30 minutes. And an encounter is when you're probing to move forward, and what do you find? The enemy. That's the encounter. And it will lead to a skirmish. Now, one more thing. If you have any questions or you need a clarification, please stop me and ask the question. Don't wait till the end of the program, because you won't remember the question. And if you do, it won't make much sense to you. Once the pieces of my little puzzle was put together, I have a narrative for the 43 men. That narrative is the depots are burning. Now, I'm one of those individuals who does not like notes scattered all over the place. As my wife will tell you, we have several cats. And where do they like to lie? Right on what you're working on. So, pardon me just 1 second, while I grab something over here. We had a lady in Sullivan who was very kind to me. I bound my notes, almost into a book. Every time I think I got this thing ready, maybe I can publish it, I keep finding new things. It's like a never-ending story. Now, our presentation. Georgia Ann Hebler of Washington County, Missouri, stated after the Civil War, when the news came in September 1864 that General Price and his rebel army was coming, my husband and I fled, leaving our few household items with a widow at Red Furnace. Now, what they're heading for is St. Louis. They figure if they can get to St. Louis, they're out of trouble. Indeed, the war had arrived in East Central Missouri. A month after the rebel army entered Missouri, they couldn't find it. The civilian leaders of the state and the military leaders couldn't find Price's army. They had no idea where he was. They sent word to everybody, if you see Price, notify us, so we know what's going on. The first thing we know about Price is outside our county, our two counties, I should say. On Tuesday, the 27th of September, 1864, unknown to the military commander for the state of Missouri in St. Louis, or the military commander at Rolla, there was a battle raging at Fort Davison, a Union military post at Pilot Knob in Iron County, just 60 miles southwest of St. Louis, and they had no idea this was going on. Price's rebel army was in action against a smaller Union force. What is even more surprising is the railroad towns to the north, that is from Franklin to Rolla, were totally ignorant of the battle raging just to their south. They had no idea. Word had not reached them that there's an action going down. But on the same day that Fort Davison was under siege by the rebels of Price's army, Brigadier General McNeil, the Union commander at the District of Rolla, issued his famous order, General 34. General Order number 34. This order was complete surprise to the citizens of the small towns along the railway. Imagine yourself not knowing what is going on, and all of a sudden you get word from Rolla, something's happening. I'm going to get to that something happening in just a moment. So the small towns from Franklin to St. James and Rolla had no idea there was this battle going on. The towns along the railroad had no natural protection. Those of you who live in the Pacific, where's your natural protection? Where can you fortify? Yeah, not there. Therefore, you had to rely on the local militia. In this case, the 63rd Enrolled Missouri Militia, better known to the residents of all the towns along the railroad as the Paw Paw Militia, for protection. Have you ever seen the prairie grass waving like this? Those Union militiamen were brave people when there wasn't a Confederate around. As soon as a Confederate soldier showed up, they vanished, just like the grass waving along. We had no protection. Thus the towns of Cuba, Bourbon, Sullivan, St. Clair, and Franklin, which is Pacific, suffered occupation and destruction at the hands of the rebels. What is this order? General Order 34? I never heard of this order. I was shocked when I found it. Here are the three main categories of this order. The town of Rolla is hereby declared a military camp. Strict military discipline will be maintained, and martial law, not civilian law, military law, will be enforced until further orders. Wow, you didn't know you were in the Army. You're in a camp. Paragraph 2, no person will be allowed to go outside the picket line during the day without a permit from the provost marshal or after retreat sundown. Can you imagine being on a train coming into Rolla and it stops at the picket line? Union soldiers search the train, then they allow the train in. And you want to go the next day to visit family? You must go to the provost marshal's office, get a permit from him. You must give your name, where you're going, and why you're going. Or you don't get to leave town. And the third little paragraph, taps. At 9:30 at night, all citizens will return to their houses and will not depart until daylight the next day. In other words, don't move. You're a prisoner in your own home. Oh, by the way, unlike the other towns along the railroad, Rolla had two forts. You know where the university is in Rolla? It sits on one of the forts. The highway department headquarters, highway patrol, the policeman, is on the other one. So they had two. So at least you could go to a fort for protection. Where in Pacific did you go? St. Louis?
Obviously, that's where everybody went.
We're still outside our two counties. On Wednesday, the 28th of September, in the early morning hours, under the cover of darkness, the Union garrison escaped from Pilot Knob and moved northward towards Potosi. The miracle of this is the rebels did not occupy the town of Pilot Knob. All the horses were still there. So the Union is not only leaving with its infantry, it's also leaving with its artillery. Under the nose of the rebels. They have no idea they're gone until the fort blows up at 5 o'clock in the morning. But they're already 3 hours ahead. They've already moved up the road. Why are they heading for Potosi? Really, they're heading for Mineral Point. The railroad is there. They get to the railroad, they can get where? St. Louis. But, I always like that word, but the town of Potosi was already occupied. Shelby's men were there. Shelby's 3,400 rebels were in the town. Thus, the Union commander swung that column westward towards Steelville and hopefully to Rolla. Now we're ready to start our first engagement. It's the battle. On Thursday, the 29th of September, 1864, Brigadier General Ewing, the commander of the Union column, abandoned any attempt to move to Rolla. Those horse soldiers will overtake him. He's got infantry. He's got artillery. So to avoid being surrounded, he has now made a decision. The column will move northward to the railroad at Harrison Station. What is Harrison Station? Anybody know the name of it today?
Leesburg.
Leesburg is correct. Sit down in Leesburg. We're moving towards Leesburg. I will tell you, if you stand on the highway going down to Onondaga Park at Leesburg, you're not in the right place. I think it's 3/4 of a mile down the river of Western. Not very well known.
What did you just say?
The actual place they're going to was 3/4 of a mile from what you see today in the town of Leesburg. It's not in the downtown part. It's 3/4 of a mile to the west of downtown. As it, you know how towns grow and develop?
Yeah.
West.
We live down in Bourbon, so I'm trying to think of Leesburg, yeah.
Now, I want you to put yourself in the Union Army going on this long trip to Harrison Station. Remember, you're wearing what type of uniforms? Wool uniforms. After midnight, the Union column swings northward into the Hoozall Valley in Crawford County. As they enter the valley, it begins to rain. It rains heavy at times. thus hampering the movement of the artillery. Those wheels don't move very good in mud. The Union column was only able to manage 12 and a half miles in 5 hours. Wet and tired, the Union column pauses to rest until sunrise. Wow, I give us in a soaking wet uniform. Uncomfortable
Yeah.
as you can be. And then, after just maybe an hour, hour and a half of rest, you're back on your feet. A little after 7, the column was on its feet, moving slowly through the valley. You can imagine the grumbling of the men in that column. They really didn't want to move. The Union column was at the southern end of an 8-mile-long ridge known as the Hoozall Ridge. It was roughly around 8 o'clock in the morning. Bang! The rebel 10th Horse Soldiers have now shattered the back door. They surprised and confused the Union rear guard and drove it back upon the column. Can you imagine the excitement in that column? The rebels are here. What did that little action cost? A 10-minute action of driving that rear guard back? The Union rear guard lost 25 men captured, 2 killed, and a number of men wounded. What did the rebels lose? 1 man killed, 2 wounded. Now, that surprise attack by the rebels avoided high casualties for them. Sounds kind of strange to make a surprise attack and you're avoiding casualties. Most people do not realize that when battles begin, the normal battle is known as open to the ball. Have you any idea what open to the ball means?
Move them back.
He knows, back there. I want you to imagine, and you've seen it in many movies, the rebels are dug in, and the Union soldiers are advancing on them. Okay? As you get into range, what is the first thing that's flying over your head, or into you? Cannonballs. There's one ball. And as you get closer, musketry, those things are called mini balls. Open to the ball. If you can avoid that, you don't take a lot of casualties. So here you have, the normal thing is open to the ball. Almost every battle, open to the ball. One side is expecting the other side. Here you have complete surprise. Now, there were 8 men from Franklin County in the 10th that made that attack. They were Privates Perry Cahill, John McKinney, James McMeekin, and Mike Williams from Miller Station. Anybody from Miller Station? Modern name? You all know it. New Haven.
Oh.
New Haven. Miller Station was known as New Haven. Private Eli Music from Robertsville. Privates Lorenzo and William Patton, brothers from St. Clair. And Alan Short from the Union area. These 8 men made that attack. The rest of their crew. The standard practice during the Civil War was to use cavalry to cover and protect the retreating column. In this case, yes,
So those 8 men from Franklin County, did you say?
Franklin County.
Were they rebels?
Yep,
So they were Confederates?
yep,
So were, most of the people in Missouri were rebels?
nope.
No. Half and half, okay, we'll talk about that later, okay.
You would
But
find,
these 8 men were
you would
rebels.
find over 80% of people in Franklin County went to the Union Army. Almost 90% in Crawford County went to the Union Army.
So, but there were,
These are rebels, yes.
These guys were rebels, okay, thank you.
Now, the men of the Union 3rd Regiment, Missouri State, here's that key word, militia horse soldiers, failed to protect the column. It was the veterans of the 14th Iowa Infantry that halted that attack. That's what peeled the rebels off of the column, was that infantry. Now, General Ewing has a problem. How are you going to correct the problem? Well, we get it out of Colonel Fletcher. He commanded the Union 47th Missouri Infantry. He gives us the new battle line. The main defensive tactic of the Union rear guard was to form a defensive line and to place the artillery in the middle and covered with both infantry and horse soldiers on the flanks. second action in the valley. The struggle continues some 5 miles further along the valley. Now you got an idea of this valley is you can't spread out. Your horse soldiers can't spread out. So you're stacking regiment upon regiment trying to attack the Union column. But here is an open meadow. The rebels quickly make a hit and run attack on the column. And you will find 4 Union soldiers are buried along this stretch of the road from that attack. Brigadier General Ewing of the Union Army stated in his report, with occasional halts to rake the woods with grape and canister. What is grape and canister? Anybody ever fire a shotgun? They're an artillery shotgun. I'm going to pass these around to you. Might be there. Give me a feet underneath. This little bag of balls, a grape round. Grape is a round cannonball. It's fired out. It will fling open and shatter these things at you, about 70 miles an hour. This is 20 of them. This is the minimum that you will find in a cannonball. They go up to 120, depending on the size of the barrel of the cannon. A canister is an oblong shaped thing stacked with these. These are 1 pound shots. If they hit a human being, it can decapitate you. They will mangle a horse. So I'm going to let you pass these around while I talk, and then everyone who's at the end back there can set them aside, and then we'll take them back here. So you have an idea. This is grape. This is canister. By the way, these are 3 to 9, depending on the barrel of the weapon.
So the grapes were inside of something bigger?
Round cannonball.
So with that
It
cannonball
had a
go up?
charge in it, and as the cannonball flew out, the charge would burn, and then the powder would explode, and these things went.
And it would blow up that metal thing
Same way.
with those inside of it?
This is inside the round one, this is an oblong one.
Okay, that's inside the round, that's inside the outer. Okay, gotcha.
They're stacked. They have metal rings inside as well. These are little nasty things. This size weight.
So how many of those were in a cannonball?
Those round ones or the little ones?
The round,
The
the
big
little
ball,
ones.
the big ball, anywhere from 3 to 9, depending on the size of the round. These are 20 to 120,
In the cannonball.
So how big could a cannonball get?
up to 12 pounders, 32 pounders. By the way, they have some in the case back there. This is part of an artillery piece that had a timer in it, powder charge, and when it blows apart, this is flying shrapnel. Give you an idea how heavy that is too. These are the things that are coming at you as a horse soldier. Okay, into carrying on here with Ewing's report. With occasional halts to rake the woods, the enemy almost constantly engaged our rear guard. The rebels have not given up. They're still trying to break that rear guard, but unable to break through or flank it until we came within 4 miles of Harrison Station. So we have this battle going back and forth. The third action in the valley. The Union column continued northward a further 2 miles. Then the column had to make a decision how to ford a high water crossing. Remember that rain during the night? It swollen the creeks. Hoozall Creek is running over its bank. You've got to get the column across. By the way, that column is not just soldiers. It's got civilians with it. So you've got to get the ladies across too. Once the Union rear guard attempted again to stop the rebels from attacking, but they got almost mangled, being driven back again. Finally, they got the signal, and they made a mad dash across the stream to save themselves. Private John Wynn of Company A, 3rd Regiment, Missouri State Militia Horse Soldier, stated in his diary, when I crossed, the water was so deep that I cowed my head and drank water without stopping, while the bullets were striking the water like large drops of rain.
And he was on a horse?
On a horse. Horse is swimming and he's drinking. By the way, there are 3 Union soldiers buried where the road crosses the creek. The narrow Valley has kept the rebels from full deployment. But several times during the line of retreat, the rebels came with that close of folding and rear guard back upon the column. During the oblong battle, the elongated battle, there were periods of whistling bumblebees and disrupted baby whimpers. Any idea what I'm talking about? Whistling bumblebees, they are mini balls from rifles. You have to hear them coming. It's so quiet. You just hear yourself breathing. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, these bullets start flying. And the baby wipers, artillery rounds going off. A great shot. So you have pieces of quiet, disrupted, quiet, disrupted. How's your nerves? And late in the afternoon, Brigadier General Ewing discovered the Meramec River was not a barrier against the rebel advance. The rebels were crossing the river everywhere. He's got a problem. His column is coming out of the valley. They are now in open terrain. Advantage the rebels. They have the horses. The column is just 4 miles from safety, 4 miles from Harrison Station. Brigadier General Ewing moved swiftly to traverse, to cover that open terrain before the column is forced into a battle of annihilation by a superior enemy. When I say the column, 1,100 Union, 7,000 rebels. 2 divisions. Our final clash in the valley. Number 4 on your map. 3 miles from Harrison Station, an all-out assault was made by the rebels. This assault unnerved the citizens in the column, almost causing panic among the green recruits. Shelby is attacking from the east and Marmaduke from the south. Here they come. The Union infantry was forced to form a retreating battle line, taking small steps backward, firing the artillery, wheeling it backward, firing the artillery to keep the rebels at bay. As daylight gave way to darkness, the Union column reached Harrison Station first and avoided the battle of annihilation. Now, not only did they reach it first, they were able to put up a strong defensive barrier. It was a perfect place to be, thus setting the stage for the next event. Private James Brown, Company A, Union 47th Missouri Infantry, summed it up the best. The ordeal in the valley was a maddening event. The engagement was an artillery engagement against rebel horse soldiers. The artillerymen raked the wooded bottomland and the areas on either side of the hollow with canister and grape rounds. The rebels kept coming. Now we have the Union column safe at Harrison Station. The demonstration. Friday the 30th of September, the chase was over. It was time to move on. If you and I could have been there in the camp with Shelby and Marmaduke, these are the 2 rebel commanders, you would have heard an argument for over an hour and a half. I told somebody this evening, Marmaduke is a West Point grad. Shelby is not. Shelby's got common sense. Any place other than in Missouri, Marmaduke would never got above the rank of captain. And here he is, a brigadier general. Now, to convince Marmaduke this was not a good idea, 4 rebel soldiers from Crawford County, Privates Lindell Paul and Harvey Benson from Harrison Mill, close by, and the brothers Joseph and Morgan Scott from Cuba in the 4th Rebel Regiment are brought in to talk to the 2 generals, describing the situation, because they know it well. The decision is made. Move eastward. We're not going to attack. Shelby will depart in the morning early, and Marmaduke will depart around midday, around 10 o'clock. But Colonel Colton Green's 3rd Regiment of Rebels was assigned the task to hamper the movement of the Union. In other words, he is assigned to keep them in place. Nice job, you do. A single regiment of less than 200 men. How many do the Union have? 1,100. Oh, we're gonna play smoke and mirrors. We're gonna have a little fun here, he says. Green wrote in his report, from early morning to late afternoon, the regiment kept the Union garrison engaged at Harrison Station. And during this action, I lost 4 men wounded. But there were 5 men from Franklin County in that regiment doing this job. There were Andrew J. Leathers from Gray Summit. There was, I like this gentleman's name, his name is General Jackson Wiley. First name is General Jackson. He is from Moselle. William and Calvin Blankenship from Boone, and James Barnes Phillips from Stanton. They were part of this action. In late afternoon, it was time to take the road eastward. They disengaged and moved towards Sullivan to rejoin their unit. So now the 2 actions are over. Our battle is done, and our demonstration has kept the Union in place. By the way, if you read the action at Harrison Mill or Leesburg, they talk about a train that came in. How it got there, no one knows. How it got down that rail line. They decided everybody get on the train and go where? To Rolla. They start up the train, get 2 miles down the tracks, and discover there are no tracks. The rebels have torn up the tracks. So they back the train back up, they're heading up the line. They go within a mile of Bourbon, no tracks. So where do they go? Back to Leesburg. You get a lot of wonderful little stories. So when you get a chance to read the history, by the way, it is not a battle at Leesburg, even though the little marker says the battle, it's actually a demonstration. Brigadier General Ewing, the Union commander, wrote in his report, at daybreak Friday, the enemy appeared in force and prepared apparently for an assault. They kept up a demonstration through the day, accompanied with heavy skirmishers, which was well replied to by our defenses. We didn't hit anything, except wounding 4 men. The rebel casualties for the action in Huzal will never know. None of the officers reported their casualties. Ewing reported his, 150 men killed and wounded, 50 men captured, and later paroled. He lost 19% of his fighting force in just 2 days in Huzal, Crawford County. As the rebel generals moved eastward, proper military intelligence was being gathered. There are several ways to obtain information. You can use scouts, you can use spies. But what about the 3rd column? That's what I call them. Southern sympathizers. They were providers of great information. Towns that had name changes. In 1845, Gray Gap became, you all know it, Gray Summit. 1859, Calvé Station became Robertsville. 1863, Franklin became Pacific. And Miller Station in 1864 became New Haven.
Became what?
New Haven.
New Haven.
In the years just before the Civil War, new towns appeared on the Franklin County textbooks. They did not appear on maps. In 1858, Catawissa appeared. 1859, Port Hudson and St. Clair. Port Hudson's north of Gerald. And in 1860, Moselle and Sullivan all appeared on the tax records, but not on what? Maps. So if you were a Confederate general, you didn't use a map, you're totally lost. You have no idea where you're at. Southern sympathizers also knew the military units in the area, whether they were regular Army troops or the Paw Paw militia. They also knew where you could find food, where you could find horses, and they definitely knew where the general stores and the mercantile stores were to be looted. You
How did
see,
they know that? How did they know where they were?
well, you came up to somebody who shops in Pacific during that period of time, they can tell you all the stores. A Southern sympathizer is a person who is willing to send his children to fight with the Confederacy, and he supports the Confederacy. So when the rebels came through, all you had to do was to find them. In fact, outside of, can't think of the name, all of a sudden it skips my mind. Yeah, Hill, Allison Hill. There's a little cemetery, you go in on the South Service Road into Bourbon, you'll see a little cemetery called Hill Cemetery. Anderson Hill was a rebel sympathizer. He spent 3 months in St. Louis in prison because of his belief. Now, he was smarter than the average bear. He had a farm just on the east side of Bourbon, and he saw the rebels coming. He knew what they were going to do. They were going to take his horses and take his food, and winter's coming on because this is late September. So he went out and he greeted them. He said, "Hello, boys. How things going? I got 2 fine mounts over here. Would you like to trade?" So he got 2 worn out horses, but at least he has horses. He said, "How about a ham, some bacon? I got a few potatoes for the road." He saved his food supply. Many of these people lost it all. When the rebels came, they just took it. So you see, Price is moving through Missouri without a cracker line. Terminology? Supply line. He has no supply line. His supply base is Freeport, Louisiana, 500 miles to the south. So technically, the roads they are selecting, the routes they're traveling, is for one thing and one thing only, to forage. That means to find what you need. In other words, we're going to live off the land, take without permission, and we're not going to pay for it. We're not going to give you any coin. You're just going to absorb the loss. Brigadier General Shelby and Marmaduke send out their bummers to Cabbage. Bummers are foragers. Cabbage, take what you want and don't pay for it. Got a new occupation. You learn how to steal. Take what you want. Nearly 70% of all the homes, farms, and businesses in Franklin County were looted, damaged, or gutted. Gutted means when I took a torch to it and burned it out. And the German citizens suffered the most because they were Lincoln supporters. Let me give you 3 small examples that you would find in the Provost Marshal's report. Samuel Carter is a free man of color. He stated he was hauling lumber for Parson Rennick when Price's army took his horses and left him stranded on the road. They didn't take the lumber, they just took the horses. W.T. Hutton, a farmer near Bourbon, reported that Shelby's command took his 2 horses, left him a worn out horse and an old mule. At least they got him. And Henry Gleason, a 39-year-old wagon maker, reported the rebels looted his shop, took all of his tools, and most of his wagon making material. What does the rebel army need with this stuff? If you're a cabbage eater, where are you going to put all that food stuff? In a wagon. So this is just to help repair it. Now this is the interesting part to me. The rebels who were doing most of this were mostly young cowboys and young farmers who cared little for military discipline and knew nothing about military tactics. They were brave, they were patriotic, and they did win a great number of battles against heavy odds. Battles they should have never won. In almost all cases, the rebels lacked proper military uniforms. The rebel clothing was beyond description. Oh, we can use words like ragged, filthy, disheveled, unkempt. And many of these men didn't even have shoes or boots, but they did strap their they did strap their spurs to their feet. And they were very well armed. But as time goes on, we get a different view of these men. This is from the St. Louis Daily Missouri Republican newspaper, dated the 12th of October, 1864. You'll find it on page 1, column 3. And here's what the gentleman wrote. Price's men are, many of them, clad in new suits of clothes. Totally poaching, robbing all those stores,
Oh,
bound to get clothing, obtained since they entered Missouri. And they daily abandoned 200 to 300 horses, worn out horses by the side of the road, and remount with fresh ones taken from citizens. We have reports of country doctors who could not make visits because their horses were gone. And when the rebels raided Cuba and burned part of the town and had left after midnight, the Union Pawpaw militia wanted to send a messenger to Rolla, but they couldn't find the horse within 4 miles of the town. The gentleman had to walk 4 miles if he found a horse. And that's how he stripped it. With that, let's take a 10-minute break. The rebel soldiers,
okay.
Okay.
they are the men I've been following. They are not typical of what you see in a movie for horse soldiers. These men are not carrying a single pistol. They will carry 4. 2 up, 2 down. If you've seen the movie Josie Wells, you pretty much got it. They do not carry sabers. Officers carry sabers. Enlisted men don't carry them. If you are a rebel horse soldier, you have pistols, shotgun, maybe a carbine, and if you are in a certain regiment, you will have the Springfield rifles used to hinder the enemy while you scatter the rear guard. But these men are horse soldiers. They can hit their mark at a gallop. They don't have to stop and pause. The other thing that most people don't realize, if you are in this troop, whether you're Union or Confederate horse soldiers, your battlefield is 6 to 10 feet from your opponent. That pistol only has a range of 40 feet. Effective range 20. So you're up close and personal. No sabers. The time you swing that saber up in the air, somebody put 2 holes in you.
You're dead.
I don't even know what a saber is.
One sword but curved.
Oh.
How many bullets would be in a pistol, just one?
6.
Oh, 6 arrows.
These are 6 shots. There's one back there to show you. By the way, you couldn't reload them. These are cap and balls. You've got to put the caps on them. And you can't pull the pistol apart, slide the cylinder on, slide another one in because you're dead.
Yeah.
So you carry the extra ones. First you use the shotgun or the carbine, and then you use your pistols. And then you have to dismount real quick, grab one from the enemy, and keep going. Okay? But these are the people. Now, the militia is infantry. They have rifles. The best soldier in the Union Army can get 4 rounds off a minute in a muzzle loader. The average is 3. 20 seconds per round. How many of you have the nerve to stand there, hold your weapon, pull that tab on that cartridge, spit it out of your mouth, pour that cartridge down, grab the thing, shove it down, pull the rifle up, reach in your pocket here, pull out a cap, slide a cap on it, and now I'm ready to fire.
4 per minute?
If you're real good.
4 per minute? Wow.
Average is 3. I'm trying to set the scenario here for you. We're now moving westward. And this is the best part of it. I say Franklin County the last because it is the most interesting for me as an individual. On Friday, September the 30th, Brigadier General Shelby's advance guard enters the town of Sullivan about the middle of the afternoon. Excuse me. All male persons in town are rounded up and made prisoners. Destruction begins. According to Shelby, the first phase is light the torches, boys. We're going to burn the depot, the railroad ties. Oh, there's some lumber over there and railroad bridge building material there. And oh, core wood for the train. Burn it all. And while you're at it, burn those 5 boxcars over there too. So they're burning everything that belongs to the railroad. That's why the depots are burning. All along this line. Phase 2 is manual labor. Chop the legs off that water tower and let it crash. Get rid of those telephone, or I should say telegraph poles. Get rid of them. Tear up the tracks 1.5 miles in each direction. Make it as miserable for the Union as possible. Sullivan got lucky. They did not destroy a single building in Sullivan. Not one of them was torched.
Why?
Shelby was more disciplined than Marmaduke's people. That's the only thing I can think of. Now, I have a nagging question, excuse me, I have a nagging question that bothers me. Did any of these men, in these various regiments in the brigade, close to home, say, I'll see you later, boys, I'm going home to visit mom and dad. Hey, my wife's over there, I'm gonna visit her. We don't know. We do know that John and Manuelus Dyson were from Shotwell. Shotwell is a little town that was 1.5 miles east of present-day Gerald. Gerald was not a town during the Civil War. It was founded in 1901. So did he travel? It's a long trip. Or how about Beverly T. Farrell from Champion City? Did he go home? Or how about John Sawyer, the brothers Benjamin and John Valentine, who lived at Boone, only a 20-minute ride from Sullivan? Did they go home? We have no idea. We do know the 2 rebel divisions spent the night at Sullivan. If you are in Sullivan, downtown bank, Sullivan, just take that property all the way back to the Meramec River. 4,300 rebels are camping with their horses and wagons. Can you imagine that? All the way back to the Meramec River. That's a lot of troops. And by the way, Shelby's camped on the other side of town, on the east side. On the morning of Saturday, the 1st of October, Shelby and Marmaduke joined Price at St. Clair. As Shelby and Marmaduke's regiments move through our county, they're adding new recruits. Many of these rebel recruits are new hats to war. In other words, they've never been in a battle, they never shot a person, they have no idea what's going on. It has been said over the years, every man will see the elephant in his first battle. It is hoped to be said, one did not fire and fall back. Translate, fire and fall back. What comes to your mind? Fire your pistol and retreat? No. No. The elephant is fear. You ever get sick to your stomach and throw up? That's fire and fall back. That's the term they use. You got sick to your stomach and threw up all over the place. In the middle of the battle. Why? Nerves. You ever shot a man? It's required of you. As the rebels advanced eastward and northward into Franklin County, members of the 54th and 55th Enrolled Missouri Militia, that's Union Militia, are prepared to defend 2 towns, Union and Washington. The war is coming to Union, but many of the militiamen did not answer the call to arms. They stayed home. They hid out. Only 40% of the men answered the call to arms. But if you and I were in Union on this day, October the 1st, we would have found 3 militia captains. Company B of the 54th Enrolled Missouri Militia, Captain Henry Dittmer. Company C of the 55th Enrolled Missouri Militia, Captain Andrew Fink. And Company E of the 55th Enrolled Missouri Militia, Captain Henry Gilhouse. The 3 captains decided they would guard the river bridge, the Burbus River Bridge into town, and Vitz Mill. They put breastworks up at Vitz Mill. Now, when you enter the town from St. Clair, across that Burbus River, you're not on the bridge. Go almost a third of a mile down the river, and you will be in the right place. So they're going to throw up breastworks. Now, they also have 1 piece of artillery. What are they going to do with it? They're going to cover the bridge. Be sure nobody crosses that bridge. Private J.H. Hannigan of Company E of the 55th Enrolled Missouri Militia stated after the war, the breastworks were near the river bridge and Vitz Mill. The breastworks were made of wooden rails with earth placed between the rails. The men of the companies worked like beavers, shoveling dirt and carrying rails. Now, while this is going on, Major General Price has turned to Marmaduke and said, take your brigade, the 1,200 men, and secure the town of Union for me. Well, Brigadier General John B. Clark, commanding that brigade, wrote in his report, we arrived at Union, Franklin County, October the 1st. Found a small body of the enemy, some 200 men strong, posted in the town to dispute our entrance. I dismounted my command, opened my artillery, a 4-gun battery. I moved rapidly to the attack, routing the enemy, killing 32 and capturing 70. This is reported. No question about his report, so we'll get to it in a minute. As the rebels approached the bridge, the Union militia took up positions at the breastworks. Captain Dittmer, in a loud, firm voice, shouted, "Ready, fire!" He repeated it twice. The rebel troops were unable to cross the river bridge. The decision was made that the 3rd, 4th, and 7th rebel regiments would dismount and make a mad dash across that Burbus River into the breastworks, putting them in the direct line of the Union militia fire. What an order, huh? What a way to wipe out 3 regiments. But in the meantime, the rebel artillery opened up. The first round of cannonballs came crashing into the trees around the bridge and its mill. The second round of rebel artillery found its mark. The cannonballs hit the breastworks, and the militiamen panicked. They could hardly be kept in a position. Captain Dittmer, remember that loud command, "Ready, fire?" shouted to the militiamen in a clear, firm voice, "Everybody for himself!" The militiamen accompanied B&E bolted and never looked back. Every man for himself. What an order!
Yeah.
What an order! Captain Fink's Company C of the 55th Enrolled Militia held their ground, but unfortunately they are pinned down now by rebel artillery. Thus the rebels had a quick crossing of the Burbus River, routing the enemy, inflicting heavy casualties upon the men in the breastworks. In taking the town of Union, the rebels suffered 3 or 4 men killed in action and about a dozen or so wounded. 5 men from the Union area in the rebel 4th Regiment of Horse Soldiers made that mad dash. Second Lieutenant Robert M. Armstrong, Sergeants Frank Barnes and John Wesley Booth, and the 2 privates Edward and Nelson Moppin. I have a problem. What idiot dismounts his men, runs them down a riverbank through a river? I thought, somebody wrote a bad report here. This can't be true. Nobody in his right mind would put you in the water to wade with your rifle above your head to get to the other side. Well, I found my answer. About 4 months later, while I was doing some research, I found this little communication between, this communication was on the 26th of September, 1864. Brigadier General John McNeil, the Union commander at Rolla, received a telegraph message from his superior, Major General William Rosecrans, commanding the Department of Missouri at St. Louis. Rosecrans wanted to know the following: which river crossings, river fords, to protect if the rebels make a U-turn from St. Louis and head towards Jeff City. Well, McNeil's reply: the Osage River can be crossed at this stage of water everywhere. It is merely a pool of water, succession pools of water. There's no water in the river, just pools. The Gasconade River is almost a dry river. It can be waded from its mouth to its source. No attention needs to be paid to bridges or fords on either stream. If those rivers have no water, guess what? The Meramec and the Burbus don't have what? Water. All of you making the charge have hardly got your feet wet. It's a dry river. Now it makes sense. Now you can take her down and up and go with the artillery. Just to read that report, you're going, what idiot is doing this? In that part. Now, here are 2 reports to kind of sum up the battle. Oh, I'm sorry, the skirmish at Union. It's actually the skirmish. Colonel Lautner of the rebel 10th Horse Soldiers reported, as the militiamen fled towards Washington, they were met by the 10th. Charging through the town, we captured 65 and killed 10. Colonel Green, who made that river crossing with his men. The enemy made feeble resistance and evacuated the place. Yeah, everybody for himself. The town of Union was the prize of the day. Now the town would suffer Price's cracker line. When the rebel army passed through St. Clair, James Ing and William Kern had their mercantiles stripped bare. The only thing the rebels didn't take was were the cases where the supplies were kept. They took everything else. Now it was the Union merchants' turn to feel the art of cabbaging. Charles Reinhardt reported losses of $8,500 in goods to the rebels that looted his store. By the way, that's a couple $100,000 today. And Arnold Renner reported that the rebels not only took his groceries and liquor, they took guns, clothing, furniture, and bed clothing worth about $700.
What do they do with furniture?
Play with it. That's all I can tell you, play with it. There was no meaning. We get one instance in Washington, in the town of Washington, a guy was walking down the street with a spinning wheel. Oh, what do you need a spinning wheel for? Just a toy to play with. Remember, these men have been on this campaign, facing death day in, day out. So when they find toys to play with, what can I say? Now we're moving towards here. Destruction of a railroad. On Friday, the 30th of September, 1864, General Price sent Brigadier General Cabell and his Arkansas horse soldiers eastward to destroy the telegraph station and the major railroad hub located in the eastern part of Franklin County. Now, again, here's a report on the Meramec River, which Cabell's going to have to cross. The Meramec River is fordable at any point now and will continue so until there are heavy rains on its headwaters, which there seems little prospects. This report came from Colonel Lewis Merrill of the Union 2nd Regiment of Missouri Horse Soldiers. Knowing the terrain and having scouting reports are one thing, but how about information from our Southern sympathizers? You see, they're going to give Cabell a free ride into the town of Franklin. Cabell will avoid the pickets by using Dead Man's Ford crossing on the Meramec River between Catawissa and Robertsville as a backdoor to Franklin. Why this crossing? He's got a 4-gun battery. That means he has artillery with wheels. You can't just go down them. You know what I'm saying? Riverbanks, you've got to have a comfortable ford. You don't want to wear the horses out, and you don't want to destroy artillery. So now, Bell is close to his destination. On Saturday, the 1st of October, 1864, while the town of Franklin, better known as Pacific, is waking up between 6 and 6:30 in the morning, Cabell and his rebels are in the town. At Union militia, at picket line, roughly 200 Union soldiers, including a few regular Army troops that were posted to guard the railroad, are brushed aside and swept up, almost 90% of them taken prisoner. The men of the 54th and 55th Franklin County men were not assigned to this task. For if they had, they might have made an effort to save the town. But no effort was made to defend Franklin. By the way, all those prisoners, when Cabell gets ready to leave Franklin, he'll parole them, tell them to go home. But he has all their weapons and horses. In capturing Franklin, the Arkansas Brigade gleaned a large number of railroad workers as prisoners. A gentleman by the name of Peter Morrison, a resident of Franklin County, was swept up in that group. And he could only watch as in quick order, Cabell's men were in the depot, machine shops, the engine house, the commissary and supply buildings, and the wood sheds, as well as destroying the water tanks. The rebels tore up the railroad tracks east and west of town. Thus, the railroad, the Pacific Railroad, is no longer a viable railroad in this county. Nothing can move because of the destruction. While this railroad destruction was going on, looting, gathering the necessary supplies was underway. Captain T.J. McKay, the Corps of Engineers Rebel Army, Missouri, stated, the rebels looted at least 8 mercantile and general stores in the town. The mercantile store and the general store nearest the railroad were the first to be looted. And when they were done, they set the town on fire, making the town almost inhabitable to live. Now, this is a little newspaper article I found, not very flattering to the people of the Pacific. St. Louis Daily Missouri Republican newspaper, 5th of October, 1862. You find this article on page 2, column 2. This town, Pacific, not even in his best days was much for looks. Is now in terrible ragged condition thanks to the rebels. Not much for looks. Wow. The encounter. After completing their mission at Franklin on the Pacific, the rebels slowly pushed eastward towards St. Louis. Just 2 miles east of Franklin, Brigadier General Cabell's Arkansas troops met and skirmished with veteran Union troops. They were the men of the 52nd Indiana and the 49th Illinois Infantry Regiments. And behind them was the 117th Illinois and 178th New York Infantry Regiments, belonging to Colonel Wolfe's 3rd Brigade, 3rd Division, Union 16th Army Corps. These are veterans who've been down in Mississippi. The Union veterans, unfortunately, were unable to unload their artillery from the flat cars. What happened was the rebels started lobbing artillery rounds. The train backed up to get out of the range of the artillery and put the railroad cars in a position that you couldn't swing the cannons to get them off. Thus, the Union troops had to advance without artillery support. That rebel 4-gun battery was doing its job and kept them at bay. Finally, after an hour or so of skirmishing, Brigadier General Cabell ordered a withdrawal towards the town of Union to rejoin General Price.
Question. Was Cabell's artillery on the same ridge where the cannon is now?
I believe so.
That was
And at
where it
least
was.
2 of them up there. I don't know where the other 2 were.
Okay.
Yeah, at least 2 of them up there. And of course, I'm sorry to say, Cabell does not write in more detail about it, nor does Colonel Wolfe write about things in more detail. Colonel Wolfe stated in his report, 9 rebel bodies were found in the town, and 30 to 40 rebels wounded. During the advance on Franklin, the Union troops suffered a half a dozen to 11 men wounded too severely. Wait a moment. He knows the rebels' casualties, but he doesn't know his own? Half a dozen to 11? Please, when you read reports, even in official reports of the War of the Rebellion, take a ton of salt with the casualty reports and inflate it to make themselves look good. This is not unusual. Cabell wrote in his report, the brigade lost 2 men killed, 6 men wounded, 8 to 10 men captured because they were drunk in Franklin. But somehow, miraculously, later they escaped and returned to their regiments. Wow. He also writes in his report here, at Gray Summit, obtained a number of fresh and good horses, sufficient to replace the broken down horses in my battery, as well as broken down and unserviceable horses in different regiments. He shedded between 300 and 350 horses at Gray Summit, and cannibalized the countryside for new mounts. So if you're a country doctor, you couldn't do any country services. You didn't have a horse. You would think the main concern of Colonel Wolfe and his infantry was to get after that rebel horse soldiers. No, he was concerned about the railroad. He writes, the rebels plundered the town of Franklin and destroyed considerable railroad tracks. I have no doubt the Meramec bridge in front has been destroyed. Well, his worst nightmare came true. They didn't destroy 1 bridge, they destroyed 3. East of Franklin, they destroyed Railroad Bridge number 1, a 4-span, 2,525-foot long bridge. West of Franklin, They burnt number two bridge, 3-spanner, 365 feet. And they got the small Brush Creek Bridge, 199 foot long as well. While this was going on, Price had sent Lieutenant Colonel Wood and his 14th Battalion of rebel horse soldiers to Moselle to destroy that bridge, which was 385 feet long. No trains were moving through Franklin County. No supplies can go to Jefferson City, none can go to Rolla. And I won't labor with you how many wagons you will need to move all that equipment from Eureka to St. Clair. But nothing is moving. Now, on the 2nd of October, 1864, the rebels entered the town of Washington, and not a Union soldier in sight. Washington was a town of 1,500 people, 10 stores, several brickyards, a number of mechanics, a good-sized brewery, a half a dozen doctors and teachers, as well as 2 bankers, an architect, a realtor, a dentist, and of course, 6 lawyers. St. Louis Daily Republican newspaper on the 13th of October, 1864, wrote this article on page 2, column 4. The day previous to the rebel entrance, it was well known here is St. Louis. The rebels were approaching. The town was garrisoned by the 54th Enrolled Missouri Militia under Colonel Gale, numbering 450 men, armed with Springfield rifles. In retrospect, the militia force at Washington was totally inadequate in number and lacked the skill necessary to defend the town. Now, I don't want you to get me wrong, they did make an effort. It was evident to the rebels that the militia did intend to defend the town. They had hastily constructed a breastwork along a ridge near St. John's Street. St. John's is 5th Avenue, 5th Street today, to repel the rebels. But made a wiser choice. They took the ferry to Warren County and then moved up to Augusta. Now, I do know these men went home. These rebel men went home. For the 4th rebel, Seth and Thomas Caldwell. They lived at South Point. South Point is part of Washington today. And from the 10th Regiment, Stephen Williams just lived a half a mile out of Washington, and he went home. What did the rest of the soldiers do? Well, I hate to tell you, looting was the fashion of the day. They roamed the streets because there were no civilians, very few civilians. So they entered houses and took what they wanted to, including a spinning wheel. They walked down the streets with a spinning wheel. The last military action in Franklin County. It happened on the 3rd of October, 1864, at Miller Station, what we know as New Haven. The rebels of Marmaduke's brigade stopped a train carrying weapons, ammunition, and clothing useful to the brigade. Then they used the train to bluff their way into Herman. Backed it up into Herman. Again, there were men in the area from the 14th Battalion and the 10th Regiment that could have gone home. The 5 days of military action, Crawford and Franklin counties had come to an end. Having met little or no resistance in Franklin County, Price's rebels departed the county on the 4th of October to advance westward in the direction of Jefferson City. And I thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, well done.
We have a rich history, folks. Don't let anybody kid you. We have a very rich history. But unfortunately, our history books do not reflect it.
It's a shame. I think to keep record, they all that up.
Well,
When you love something.
I gave the young lady here the material I used. I used about 4 or 5 secondary sources. Secondary means somebody else's book. But what I basically used was primary material. I went through the ORs, diaries, provost marshal's reports to get this. There are cute stories to tell. Like when the troops were camping tonight, they had bottled the Union up at Harrison Station. They sent the 4th and the 14th down to Cuba, burned the railroad down there, destroy things. There were 3 mercantile stores. When the rebels left, 2 more on fire. Mr. Upshaw's and Mr. Sweden's stores were burning. But Mr. Peace's store had been looted, but it was not burning. Why? Here's the story. An elderly gentleman, elderly in those days was 50 years old, had been in very poor health, took a pistol as he sat outside town and shot himself.
Oh,
Since there was no, how shall we say it, funeral home within the town in those days, they put him in a pine box and put him in Mr. Peace's store window so people could pay respects. When the rebels arrived, he was still in the window. So out of the respects for the corpse in the window, Mr. Peace's store was done.
Aw.
If the corpse had not been there, the store would have been up with the rest of them.
oh my gosh.
That's the fun part of doing history. You never know the stories.